What's going on, guys? Magnus here, and if you're new to my channel, please consider subscribing. If you like what you see today, I'm going to try my best to try to entertain you and kind of give you something to think about, because it's something that I always think about. Have you ever heard of someone posting a video? Say you're interested in cameras, and what you see next to me actually right now is a video playing of pretty much the cameras that I've got on my table. You'll notice a bunch of different brands: Panasonic, Canon, Samsung, Blackmagic. Those are the different brands that I have. So have you ever noticed those videos, like, someone will pop Sony or Canon and then why I'm switching? You've had to see those why I'm switching videos a ton of times. I've seen them, and I think that all of the reasons that most YouTubers give are valid on why they'd want to switch camera brands. But just because they're valid doesn't mean I particularly fully understand them. Ugh, I'm a little close here. But let me explain why. And we're going to go by kind of like the list of cameras that I have and why I use them. Then I'll tell you why, and I'll show you why I'm not really into the whole switching game. Now, first I'm going to start with this Canon M50. Have this Canon M50 because it's a great small travel vlogging camera. It's excellent for just getting quick shots when you need them. You want to travel light, you can fit it in a small bag, or probably too big for your pocket if you're using a standard lens. But it's got a flip screen. You can just attach a mic to the top if you're going to record, or you could take some pretty amazing pictures with this. And it's just so light that, when you put it away, it could do so much and create some excellent images, and then you just toss it aside. So this camera is why I actually like using this camera, and because of the size and how small it is. So put that aside. Then I've got actually a couple of these. This is a Samsung NX1, making sure I got it on the shot. So Samsung NX1 is a great APS-C. So the sensor size is just as good as it is on the Canon M50. At least it's the same size. But what I enjoy about this camera is the abilities that it can pack in some amazing pictures that I can get off of this camera. That is truly hard to come by. Plus, it features 4K at 30 frames per second. It features slow motion at 120 frames per second. And it does a slow motion with full autofocus and sound availability, all in this nice package. It's still pretty compact, and the background blur you get, especially off of these lenses, is pretty intense and amazing. So I love this, and I installed a hack on it, so I have unlimited recording as well if I want to do that. But it's great for pictures and video. It's like both packages in one. It doesn't have a flip screen, so it's not the best for like self-vlogging. But if you get a good shot and you position the camera well and it's got pretty good autofocus, you're set. So that's why I have the Samsung. Next, and I'm trying to make sure I have all the cameras within hand's reach so that I can just pull them out and then show them to you. I have the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. Now I got a small rig, little cage on it. But I like this camera because it's a cinema camera, and when I need to record something cinematic, when I need to record for a long period of time, and I have the camera just connected to power, and I want to use raw footage and get that really nice cinematic look. Granted, there's no autofocus here, but it's got a great look and a great codec to edit with. I mean, even the raw files in video editing just are so easy to work with, and they play very well in my editing software, that it's like just the perfect cinema camera. Again, horrible for vlogging, horrible for any type of autofocus situation where you need to run and gun. But when you plan your shots and you've got everything, this camera is almost unbeatable. Then moving on, let me actually reach for this. Give me 1 second. It's kind of far out of reach there, but I've got the Panasonic Gh4. Now this Gh4 again has a flip screen. It's micro four thirds sensor, so it's slightly smaller sensor, but it's got incredible dynamic range in its V-log, so that's kind of like a flat image that you can really get a nice broad dynamic range with it. 10-bit color, easy to edit with as well. And though the autofocus to this day when I use it is not the best, it's a good general camera, and it's depended on by a lot of filmmakers. It's got 2 SD card slots, which is good as well, and it's just got a bunch of like video-centric settings for a camera that is okay to vlog with. And it's a little heavier. It's actually pretty heavy for a tiny camera with a smaller sensor, but I like it. So last but not least, I've got, the brands I've mentioned. I mentioned Samsung, Canon, Blackmagic, Panasonic. Then I've got a couple of more Canons, but Canon, let's just generalize into Canon full frame. Like what you're seeing in the video, it's gonna pull up right now, right on that little Gorilla tripod, which is what I'm using right now, is the 5D Mark IV. And then I've got this Canon 6D, 2 full frame Canon cameras. Now the 6D I'll use as a backup camera to the 5D Mark IV when I'm filming with it. It's limited at 1080p, 30 frames per second. It's pretty old, but the image that you get out of the 24 or 30 frames per second in 1080p is amazing. And it does 60 frames per second in 720p, which is really soft looking, but it's still not bad. However, when you need 2 cameras that are Canons that are filming in 1080p at 24 frames per second, you can't go wrong with the 5D Mark IV Canon 6D setup. It's got no autofocus, probably terrible for vlogging because you can't autofocus, nor can you see yourself. But just to get the footage as a backup camera, that's why I have the Canon 6D. And then the 5D Mark IV, incredible autofocus, 2 card slots, great pictures. When I just want to have a pro camera that does most of what I need in one package, especially for photos, it's the 5D Mark IV. The close second for photos and videos is the Samsung NX1, but really for the full frame look and the versatility that I get, it's the Canon. Now let's get to the subject of why I have all of these cameras. And Freddie, welcome. You just got the Gh4. Gh4, like I said, is a great camera. It's a good all-around camera, though I don't use it too much for stills, but you definitely can. And only recently, Gh4 has been somewhat of a headache based on the colors for me. I never have been a fan of what you get out of the camera naturally with the colors. But one of my videos that I recently discovered after another video on YouTube is that you can do a preset in my editing software, Adobe Premiere, to actually get the colors every time look exactly the way you want them. And then I have a new appreciation and love for the Gh4. But let's get to my point. My confusion of why these cameras themselves, I've got them all, and why I would think I need to switch from one camera brand to another just because this camera has better features now, so I'm going to switch all my lenses and go to this brand. I don't believe that. M-Hot18, you just got the 90D. That's an incredible camera as well. I'd say it's similar to 5D Mark IV colors, actually, but you might actually get some few added features on the 90D. Smaller sensor, but it's still an amazing camera. So congratulations on that, by the way. So I would say that my confusion is that you get a camera for what you need it for, and you get a camera for different situations. The body itself, you hope to have the most features that you can out of it, but you won't get everything. And I know that there are a lot of people that when they choose a camera brand, they love that Canon brand, that camera brand. I said Canon brand, and they'll stick to it no matter what. They'll say, you know what, Gh4 is better than any camera that Sony or Canon ever released. Or I find myself saying in plenty of occasions, let me pull it up over here, and plenty of occasions that this might be a camera that that came out like years ago, but the Samsung NX1 can still compete with most cameras out there today in a lot of the features. And I do believe that that's true. But it doesn't stop me from looking at another brand and saying, I think I'll try that because it has what I need that the Samsung doesn't do. Like I wanted 4K 60. I bought the GH5. I wanted raw recording. I bought the Blackmagic. Now, we don't all have that money, and sometimes we have to choose carefully for what we buy. And especially photographers, I think that sticking to one brand does make sense because for photography, you're just taking pictures. So you get the camera that can take pictures, and cameras just for pictures alone can last you a lot longer. I know professional photographers that still stick with the 5D Mark II that was released over 10 years ago, and they still release amazing photos. But for video purposes, technology moves a lot quicker, and that's why we'd want the latest. Now, here's my point. I own all these brands, and the reason is because I need a different camera for a different reason. And like I explained with each camera and why I use it. But then it comes to the question of what about lenses? You need to, you almost stick with a certain camera brand because you have to invest in lenses. And then when that camera brand is no longer something that you want to work with, you have to just switch all of your lenses to that brand because they're usually not compatible to cross-pollinate. And I can understand that. Like I said, with photographers, I can understand that. But I've never had that issue at all when it comes to purchasing cameras. If I like a camera, I'm going to purchase it. And I'll tell you why. This is what I do. I own a couple of actually like 4 Samsung lenses. But I own Blackmagic, Panasonic, Samsung, 4 different brands. And that is because most of my glass is EF glass. And it's so adaptable to get EF glass to different camera brands. It almost makes it an easy choice to at least stick to one glass type and then just buy adapters for different type of cameras and go with that. Now, that's not the best option for everyone, but it works for me. For example, I've got this Samsung NX1. The Samsung series of cameras pretty much no longer exists. This was one of the last of the great cameras. It's still an incredible camera, but what if I want to diversify, but I can't find the lenses on Samsung, right? Well, what I do is I'm going to show you a little demonstration. I'm going to stick this 50mm EF lens onto my Samsung. And I'll do it like this. This is an adapter. This is EF to NX adapter. Attach it. Disconnect my Samsung lens, and now I probably am not mounting it the way you should, but there it is. I've got my EF glass on this Samsung NX1. So 50mm f1.4 lens, Canon lens, as you see on the front, on the Samsung. And it works to get a really shallow depth of field when I want to use the Samsung on a shoot and I want this 50mm range. Now, because it's a cropped sensor, I don't get the full. I don't get a 50mm shot. I get about 75mm equivalent off of this APS-C, but it's still, I can still use this here, and I can use a lot of my lenses. Now, there are a couple of drawbacks with this particular adapter. Autofocus, it does not work, nor with this lens can I change the aperture. So I can't change it in the settings, nor could I change it on this lens because it doesn't have a manual aperture ring. But because I work mostly with filming, I use an ND filter to darken my exposure if necessary. though my depth of field can't be changed. So that's something I keep in mind. But usually when I get this lens attached to this camera, it's because I want a pretty much a shallower depth of field. I want it to be very, very tight. So I get that perfect shot. And because I do have Samsung lenses, I can work with this one only if necessary. So, but everything would be manual. But again, it's something that I could do, and I have the action. As someone who works with video, I have the option of doing. So moving on, let me reattach the Samsung lens. That's the one thing about Samsung that, trying to get this thing on. It's the one thing about Samsung that I am sad about, is the fact that the lens lineup is so limited right now. Hence, EF glass works so that I can continue using my Samsung brand for years to come if I want to buy more lenses, because I don't have that right look. Like I'll use my Tokina 11 to 20 millimeter lens on the Samsung, because many times I want to actually get a wide shot, and that would work perfectly for me. So here we go. Next camera on the list is the Blackmagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, and we're taking the same lens, the same 50 millimeter lens, and we're going to attach it to the front of the Blackmagic. So same lens, fits on the second brand that I'm telling you. And I have this attached. Now this is a very expensive Metabone Speed Booster Ultra. So it pretty much makes your micro 4/3 or 4/3 sensor. It's not a micro 4/3 sensor. It makes the 4/3 sensor, instead of a 1.9 times crop, it makes it about a 1.2 times crop, which is almost like simulating a larger sensor on the Blackmagic. And it's expensive, but you can also find a Viltrox adapter that's slightly less expensive, and then just mount it, and you have autofocus and aperture control fully usable on this camera with EF glass. And that's, again, I stick to EF and I'm good. I won't ever see the reason why I would need to buy micro 4/3 lenses on this camera. I don't have to. I could, because it'll be lighter and I won't have to adapt it so much. But I don't have to, and that's the point. The point is, I don't need to switch all my lenses to micro 4/3 lenses. And I found that I can get a better f-stop number by using the speed booster and the EF lens at a reduced cost versus getting a really fast micro 4/3 lens, which is expensive, and then I'd only be able to use it on micro 4/3 cameras. So, and I love the micro 4/3 mount. It's awesome. So again, M-Hot 18, good choice for buying micro 4/3, because you can pretty much use anything on that. So moving on. So I did the GH5, I did the Blackmagic, but what about Canon's M50? Now this uses an M mount. An M mount is kind of in a weird place, because the M50 is a mirrorless camera from Canon, but it's not an R mount. It's like a APS-C exclusive mount for their mirrorless line, which is, it's like, why are we even there? Can't we just use an RF glass on this APS-C size? But no, Canon's still pushing this separate mounting size. But what if you don't want to adopt that type of lens mount, or invest in this lens mount and really be limited to only their APS-C Canon M50? Well, I'll take this lens off, and Viltrox sells a speed booster for the M50. I'll attach that. The same 50 millimeter lens. What? No, that's not it. Where did I put the? Oh, I left it on the Blackmagic. Hang on. So that same 50mm lens that I've been showing you this whole episode, now on the M50. Now this Viltrox 0.71 times reduces the crop factor of the M50 from 1.6 to again about a 1.2, almost full frame on the M50, which shoots 4K at 24 frames per second. Contrast detect autofocus though. It doesn't use a dual pixel, but the 1080 does use dual pixel autofocus at almost full frame. So it's like almost having a full frame mirrorless camera, and the autofocus and aperture works with this Viltrox adapter because it's a pass-through. And there you go. EF on an M mount based off of this speed booster adapter, or you could call it's a focal reducer. Speed booster is the brand name for Metabones. So Viltrox, it's a focal reducer. Metabones, it's a focal reducer, branded as speed booster. So there you go. Another camera that works with EF glass. And then I don't even have to show you guys, but I will anyway for the sake of this video. Finally, the full frame Canon glass. Full frame Canon glass on my Canon 6D. Same lens. Has been mounted on all my camera brands that I have here. The Samsung, the Panasonic, the Blackmagic, the Canon mirrorless APS-C, all of them. So yes, I can understand sticking to a brand when you want to stick to a brand because you're disappointed or you're a one camera person, you only want one camera, you only want one set of lenses, and then you switch a lot. But me, like I said, when it comes to video, I need usually more than one camera production. At times, I'm shooting with 4 or 5 cameras at a time. And I need each camera to function slightly different depending on my situations. So I don't want to be caught without the ability to shoot a certain type of style because my camera doesn't allow me to do that. And right now, there's a limited set of cameras that have every feature to do it all. I am excited about the Canon R5 because it's almost like it does it all, almost. But my concerns with that would be like, I like recording RAW, and I don't believe that Canon would use a compressed RAW that's comparable to Blackmagic when it comes to editing. And I can do a lot more off of Blackmagic. So then there it is again. It's not perfect, and the file sizes are going to probably be huge. When I don't want to work with that, I'm going to choose a different camera. When I don't want a heavy camera, I'm probably not going to choose the R5, which again is a camera I want to get. I'll probably use the M50. It's just, there's always a different camera for a different purpose. For taking photos, I might start leaning towards the R5, and I might have no use any longer for my Canon 6D. I'll still probably keep the 5D to keep a higher end camera, but I'll probably not need the 6D anymore because I won't need so many cameras to take pictures with. I'll be good with just 2 Canon cameras. And that's my point. If you're going to pick a brand, I understand if you're taking photos, but don't think of yourself as investing in the brand. Think of choosing the right lenses. If you're investing in lenses, think about that. The EF lenses themselves, although they're getting replaced by the RF lenses, they still hold value for adaptability to mirrorless cameras. And that is pretty much where I'm going to leave that. Mirrorless, especially if you're investing in mirrorless bodies, having EF glass makes it a breeze. And the reason that these work, and if you don't know, the reason why you can adapt DSLR lenses to mirrorless bodies is because of the flange distance. The mirror requires a set of space between the sensor and the actual lens. That space is a lot bigger than the space required for a mirrorless camera because the mirror has to flip up on a DSLR, where a mirrorless camera, it does not. So the back of the lens has to actually direct light at a farther distance on EF glass. So what that allows is the ability to attach an adapter to attach from one lens type to another. And now this distance added by the adapter is the perfect amount of distance that you need in order to hit your lens at the right spot on a mirrorless camera. Because mirrorless lenses like this one that I'm going to show you right here, like the M50's lens, this is a 15 to 45 millimeter lens. The sensor would be real close to it, real close. Like when I put it on the M50 right now, this sensor is like right there, really close to this. So I'm going to attach it, and doesn't have much distance. But because like I said, the EF glass needs a little bit more distance, it allows you to put an adapter to make that distance and then make it work. But if you invest in mirrorless glass, you won't be able to adapt it. And if you are, the fact that you're able to do that, for example, is amazing. But to add a speed booster to it or some type of focal reducer will be even more difficult, which might require you to actually add modifications to your camera in order for that to happen. So think about investing in EF glass, especially now since it's getting replaced with RF glass. The prices might go down. And that's what really I believe is the benefit. You start investing in like Sony glass or RF glass, then yeah, I totally understand sticking with a brand, and then it makes sense to stick with a brand. But because I've invested in EF glass, forget about it. I've had the easiest time to purchase all these cameras and not have a shortage or a situation where it's like, I don't have a particular lens that I need for this particular shot that I want to get with this particular camera that does this feature really well. So Parasec, totally agree. Thank you. It's great that I'm not alone in this. So what do you guys think? What type of lenses do you have for what type of cameras? Let me know, and if not, I'll end this stream. I'll give it a couple seconds, and I should just start putting this stuff away because I tear up my studio as much as I possibly can. I did actually a video this particular weekend, actually last weekend, and I edited it. It was one of my hardest videos. I did a mix of 2 music videos, like a remake. So if you guys have heard of Bohemian Rhapsody, I actually am a pretty big fan of that song and the music video itself. So while in quarantine in these times, in this very studio, I reshot most of the music video. That last portion I didn't, but I remade the whole thing with just me playing all the characters in that music video and editing all of those different scenes in that music video. And I'm going to do a video on this channel showing you exactly how I did that. Then I did this other like dance off with NSYNC. So if you see me versus NSYNC, or you search for that on YouTube, I hope you'll be entertained. And I'll show you how I shot that as well. But you'll notice that it's me as like different characters. And all of that was shot with the 5D Mark IV for the most part, because it did the autofocus and I needed, and it did the right colors. So MHOT18, I chose Canon, not only for the glass, but for the menu interface. Yeah, Canon has a really easy to navigate menu interface. So I do agree with you on that. Hugh Tran says, I have EF and some micro four thirds lenses. Good choice. Again, I do like micro four third lenses as well. I actually had an 18 to 200, 3.5 to 5.6 micro four thirds lens. It was kind of like a broad range that I would use for micro four thirds. However, I broke it. It was attached to my GH5 on a tripod, and I knocked it over, and it just shattered. And I always thought, should I get another one? But I found myself being like, okay, I paid like $350 or $400 for that lens. And I was never satisfied with the fact that the light was terrible. You couldn't absorb as much light as you wanted, and you couldn't get that shallow depth of field look, even if you were zoomed in as much as possible. Yet I purchased, see this lens? This is a 75 to 300 millimeter EF lens. It's very cheap. It was like $70. It was refurbished, but $70, 3.5 to 5.6. Okay. This lens on a micro four thirds camera. Where's my GH5 and speed booster? I want to get this measurement right, so I'll attach this lens to my Panasonic Gh5. Remember, this is a $70 lens. Okay? To get that same range that I would get from the other lens, granted not the wider range, but the farther range. Right now on the Panasonic, when zoomed in, it's a f2.7 lens. When zoomed in all the way, it goes to f3.6. So 2.7 to 3.6. Do you know how much that would cost me on micro four thirds? That in itself was like, that's why I'm like, I might as well get a $70 lens and then just put the speed booster on it, because I could save a ton of money, gather more light, get a better shallower depth of field. I'm not going back to micro four thirds, though. Micro four thirds on the GH5 works a ton better for autofocus. So don't get that wrong. Autofocus does work on the speed booster, but much better when you use native lenses. So Parasec, I started with basic Canon APS-C with EF glass, then upgraded to 5D4 for exactly this reason. Yeah, APS-C glass I tend to avoid because I don't have APS-C glass for DSLR, but I did get the 11 to 20 Tokina lens, which is EF, but it's meant for APS-C sensor, because on the 5D Mark IV, it crops in 1.74 times when you're shooting in 4K, and having APS-C, at least APS-C glass, was perfect for it, because 11 millimeters cropped in is like, let's just say 16, 17 millimeters on the 5D Mark IV when shooting 4K, and it got me perfect wide shot when filming 4K. So I no longer have that issue of it cropping in too much. I put it at 11 millimeters off that Tokina, and I can hold the camera up in front of me, know it has me in focus, and not even worry about it. And I don't pay the absurd amount of money that it costs for the full frame. I think it's 11 to 24 f2.8 on the full frame version from Canon. It's like $1,600 or something like that. Not worth it for me. So Friday, I have all micro four thirds. I also have two G85s. I may try to buy me the Metabone speed booster and buy some Canon EF glass though. Yeah, Metabones is good. Viltrox if you want to spend less money, but Viltrox is a little softer on the edges, so the quality won't be as sharp as Metabones. And Metabones charges at least $650 for that adapter. But Viltrox brand here is a little softer, but when you're filming, it's very hard to see the difference. And I've used the Viltrox on the Canon M50 and been pretty good with it. So little to no issues. Um, Ulrich, hi, I think EF is the best to adapt, but for me, small size is important. So I switched from Nikon to Panasonic 10 years ago. Yeah, at least from the 4/3 glass, if that's important to you, especially trying to stay compact, it makes sense to switch or at least to have smaller lenses. But you also are limited to what you can do with them. And if you're willing to accept that when it comes to like adaptability, then that's fine. It totally makes sense. It just, for me, it didn't make sense because I don't normally have the concern of being compact. I do have a camera when I do want to go compact with a very small lens, which makes it easy. So I no longer have that concern, but to invest in everything small, especially when you're looking to get different focal length and different ranges, it's nice to keep it small, but then I find it limiting when it comes to, or expensive when it comes to the versatility of the final image. For me, what I do prefer is I'm very self-punishing. It's almost like a masochist. I will do or go through whatever it takes to get the shot. I was in Denmark in the middle of last year, in the summer of last year, but July. And when I went there, I brought the heaviest camera that I have, the 5D Mark IV. I brought it with, I don't have it around me, it's somewhere around here. I used I don't have it, but like a stabilizer, an electronic stabilizer, a gimbal. That's what I called it. It's around here somewhere. Zhiyun Crane 2 with the 5D Mark IV, with the 24-70 f2.8 USM2 lens, with this microphone, which is a Rode VideoMic Pro, on top of it, holding it out while vlogging or filming for some days. Let me tell you, that's torture on your back, but I didn't care. I wanted to do it because I just care about the shot more than I cared about anything else. And it got me the pictures and video that I wanted. And yeah, it was heavy. And I had a backpack on me, so I didn't have to hold it the whole time. But it was heavy, but I found it was worth it. That won't work for me forever. And my back is not that great, so I wouldn't recommend that. But there was also shots where I brought the Blackmagic. And I brought the Blackmagic. It's a smaller sensor. You can use smaller lenses, but it's still a roughly big camera. I didn't care. I still wanted to use it. But if that's not you, then definitely I don't recommend that for anybody. I'm the only person that I know who would want to do that. Who else would want to carry so much weight with them? Don't do it. Don't do it. I won't ever advise anyone to do that. But when you want the shot, you bring the equipment that you're going to need to get the shot. If you travel light, and you're disappointed that you didn't get the particular type of look that you wanted with the camera that you used, you'll either have to travel there again or you just don't get the shot that you wanted for the way it looked. Me, I don't like to make that sacrifice. I go all in. So Ulrich, I do a lot of bicycle related stuff and I have to carry everything on the bike most of the time. Oh man, that's a tough thing. I love to bike ride. Believe it or not, behind me, which you can't see because it's at like a green screen, so you see like a green hue around me. Behind me, I've got my mountain bike that I wanted to just start ripping and riding this summer everywhere. And I can't use it now because of the current times where most of us are locked away in. So, and I'm a high risk person, so I shouldn't be out there anyway. But the moment that things have calmed down and we're in a lot better position, I'm lifting up this green screen, pulling out that bike, and just I'm out of here. If I were to bike ride, now that you mention it, if I were to bike ride, I'd probably bring, and I'm gonna film it. I'd probably use my phone. I'm gonna stick to phone because I think I could get a better handling when it comes to using a phone and bike riding. I have a Samsung S20 I can record 8K but choose to record 4K so that I can maintain stabilization. And then I'd probably just use that if I'm going to record, because at that point I won't need shallow depth of field unless I plan for it for the type of shot. So, Tran, how come you don't put cap on your camera? You don't want the sensor to get dust in it? No, I don't. I definitely don't. But for this particular case, and not paying attention to this because I wanted to give priority to you guys, I wasn't looking at the camera. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pay attention to you and put the cap back on my cameras. I feel so guilty now. So, but with that in mind, what I do to at least avoid dust is either put the camera's face down so it's not getting into dust, but I have some carpet here, so I don't want to do it because it will just bounce out. And luckily, like on the Gh4, for example, with the speed booster, it's got the lens that's protecting the sensor, so I don't worry too much about that. But with the Blackmagic, I put it sitting down carefully and away from anything that'll pick up dust from it. But it's still a risk. I shouldn't have done that. And I accept that I didn't, and I probably shouldn't have. So I'm going to reattach this lens that I have. And I should stop hitting the microphone, because the actual cover to this is nowhere to be found. Okay, hope I made you happy. But you're right. Have you ever used the Canon C200 or the C300? I have, but not in a professional shoot. I was at a Canon conference. It was like a photographer and videographer like conference and presentation in New York City. I think at this point it might be a year ago or maybe 2 years ago. And I got to use the camera and see, feel it, see it, shoot with it, kind of feel how it handles. And I get that itchy feeling of like, I want this camera. I should be owning a C200, C300, or C500, but I don't need it. And that's why I don't have one, because there hasn't been a situation where it's like, I need one of those cameras. I don't need the dual pixel autofocus when I'm shooting something cinematic. I prefer manual for those type of shots. And when I do need autofocus, I do have my 5D. I do have the Samsungs that work well with autofocus. And the reasons that I use autofocus are usually for vlogging, or what I'm doing now, which autofocus is picking me up fine, or like certain type of run and gun event. And usually this camera, 5D or the Samsung NX1 will do just fine with me. But like the raw recording and the dynamic range that the cameras do have, and all the buttons that they have, and the ability to record raw, I didn't need raw, and I got the Blackmagic for that. I do appreciate the dynamic range, but I don't need the dynamic range. I've never felt where I couldn't get the right exposure or enough dynamic range in whatever type of shot that I'm looking for. I've filmed a lot of like cinematic style videos. I've done a ton of music videos. I've done weddings. I've done different events. And the one of the events, you'd be surprised, is not movies that require a lot of dynamic range, but it's stage presentations, especially plays, or like I do a lot of dance recitals, and dynamic range is so important. And I have been able to get the dynamic range by setting my Canon into log mode, setting my Panasonic into log mode, or recording with the Blackmagic in film style. When I do that, it helps. And yeah, it's on a loop. I've got the video next to me on a loop, so you could just kind of refer to or see all the different cameras that I have. And to have something moving next to me, I could stop it if you'd like. Just let me know if you guys are irritated by that thing moving back and forth. That's totally fine. But dynamic range is important to me. Those cinema cameras would be amazing for those type of shots, but I don't need them because, again, I'm able to accomplish that dynamic range. Like I was saying in stage performances, many times, especially like let's say for dance recitals, in the front, because the kids are in the front, they will be lit very bright by the stage lights that's just hitting them with a harsh light. But the kids in the back aren't as well lit. And the parents would be upset if they got a video that shows that their kid in the back is completely missing while the kids in the front you can see perfectly. But then if you expose for the kids in the back, then the kids in the front are blown out, and then those parents are upset. So dynamic range under those conditions are important. Yet my favorite camera is the Blackmagic under that, because it just picks up everybody beautifully. 13 stops of dynamic range. Realistically, it's about 12, but it's 13. Like, I think Panasonic Gh4 advertises 12 stops of dynamic range in Vlog, but you actually get maybe 11, not quite 12. So yeah, that's it. So I mean, I guess I've talked a lot. I've kind of just dumped all my cameras off to the side here, but definitely check out some of my other videos where I've actually tested and used a lot of these cameras. And I'm going to do a comparison in the near future of the Canon M50 versus the Samsung NX1. Now, they're both APS-C cameras. One came out like 5 years ago. The other one came out like a couple of years ago, the M50, which is a popular YouTube camera. But which one is the actual best for filming? So that's what we'll test. I'll take that. One last question from Freddie. Have you dabbled in Final Cut Pro and DaVinci Resolve for editing? I've dabbled in all three, Final Cut Pro, DaVinci Resolve, and Premiere. I've done a ton of videos on Premiere on my channel. I have this one video on this channel as well that you can check out that is me actually editing one or two videos off DaVinci Resolve, which I learned in that video. DaVinci Resolve is amazing for editing things. The only reason why I don't use it more often is because I can output a project quicker on Adobe Premiere because I'm familiar with it. If I increase my education on DaVinci Resolve, which I could still put out a video pretty quickly, but to get those little tweaks that I'd really want to put in, I still kind of defer to Adobe Premiere. But DaVinci Resolve is amazing. Final Cut Pro X, not a fan of. It's super fast when it comes to rendering in many situations, but depending on your computer, sometimes you might get better results off of DaVinci Resolve, which has severely improved its rendering and output. Like, DaVinci Resolve is neck and neck, and at times even beats out Final Cut Pro when it comes to just compiling your footage and really getting it out there, because those two programs do take advantage of your graphics card much better than Adobe Premiere. Adobe Premiere is still way laggier than the other two, but it's the familiarity that I have with the program and just being able to do whatever I want without having to look it up or, play with it. So that's why I actually prefer Premiere, but it's because of familiarity. I've been using Adobe Premiere since like 2000, 2001. I've actually been doing video editing, believe it or not, since about 1996. I used to use, like, in big studios, the super VHS tapes and putting them into my editing equipment and then just kind of tracking what shots I want and where to cut them. Again, I don't remember what that was way back when, it was called. And then I just kind of mark it on the switchboard. And then after I marked all the shots that I want edited on the super VHS tape that I want to record to, the machine would just go back and then put the cuts exactly where I put them and how I wanted them put. And I had like a huge switcher and things like that. I worked in a studio. So that was fun way back in 1996. So, and then using the first few versions of Final Cut Pro and digital editing when I was learning digital editing. I mean, these were different times, and it was amazing to actually see timelines tracked. And then I got Adobe Premiere early 2000 and have worked with Premiere for, wow, 20 years at this point. 20 years. It's pretty nuts. I'm old. But this is fun, and I definitely enjoy learning with you guys and learning all these different situations. But I've gone for 50 minutes. This has been a while, and I'm enjoying taking this Friday night to talk to you guys. I don't feel like I'm alone because you guys joined me, and that means everyone who joined me tonight, thank you so much, because I feel like I just had a cool, awesome Friday night hangout, and it was like cool. I could just talk about like cameras and nerd out with you guys. But that was fun. Definitely leave a like and subscribe and hit the notifications if you enjoyed this video, or if you like talking to me, or if you want to actually hit me up. My Twitter's at Magnus547. And that's the same handle for my Instagram. And then just talk to me. I will always reply, whether you leave comments or anything. I'm not like 10 million followers and all of that. I'm just one of you guys, just trying to learn. So definitely take care, and thanks for all the comments tonight. You can make my day if you subscribe today, as always. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys next time. Bye-bye.